When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's right, everybody. We are back, and this episode is going to be a killer interview. Today, we have the pleasure of sitting down with Jonathan Schor, one of the founders and current CEO of CodeMonkey, a web-based platform where kids can learn to code through puzzles and games. Jonathan has worked in tech for a number of years in software development, starting at Cav Systems in July of 2000 as a software developer, and he worked his way up the ranks to project manager and team leader in 2011, before starting CodeMonkey in 2014. This interview is going to cover a whole bunch of things, including questions like, hey, at a young age, should kids be learning to code? Should the school system be sort of, quote unquote, forcing kids to learn how to code with a class or two? Is this something that we should be introducing our kids to? How important is gamification when you're teaching kids or just teaching adults or anyone? Is gamification a big thing? Do we worry about it? Does the game have to mask the fact that the kids are learning? And also, what about sort of the newcomer effect? And that, what I mean in this case is AI's here, and a lot of people are like, you know what, that coding thing, that's in the past. AI is going to come take it over. And so are there going to be any sort of newcomer effect issues? Is the industry going to go through a slump of no one wants to become a developer? There's no new recruits because everyone just thinks they're going to be replaced by AI. Now, without me spoiling any more of the interview, let's cut to it right now. Alrighty, everybody, we have Jonathan on the line here. Before we jump into this loaded episode, Jonathan, what's up? How's it going? And what have you been working on?
Hey, thanks for having me. Things going great. I'm working hard on CodeMonkey. We've been doing for the last 10 years since starting the company in 2014. And it's an exciting time to be in education technologies and around computer science and tech specifically.
Well, that's actually like a perfect kind of introduction right into my first topic because, education, technology, things, they're kind of moving quickly because of AI and other things like that. And there's a lot of content being made, right? There's been a lot of content being made by content creators for the past, who knows, 10 years, 5 years, whatever, around coding. And a lot of that coding the tutorials, the guides, the videos, they're largely directed at adults, maybe teens and high school kind of thing. But CodeMonkey seems to be just mostly for kids. So, Jonathan, do you think that it's important that people learn to code at a young age?
So I think it's the best age to get your first taste of coding and to try it. I wouldn't say it's important for everyone. I definitely don't think that everyone should learn to code, but I would recommend everyone to play around with it a little bit. And the younger they start doing it, the better, because it's simply easier when you're younger. It's like picking up a new language. When you're 5 years old, you can pick up French in just 2 months without even noticing it, And when you're an adult, it could be very difficult to learn a new language. So coding is the same, I believe. The younger you try to start learning it, the easier it is for you.
So you mentioned that or obviously earlier in life is, it's good. You can kind of pick it up quick. Do you think, though, that this should be something, because this has kind of been a topic, at least in my local jurisdiction, has been a topic of, should you add some coding, even if it's just sort of light coding, to sort of the general curriculum? Should you, quote unquote, force kids in public school to at least try it? Not drag them through, 100 courses of it or anything, but just to see if they like it. And then when they get to high school, and again, at least in my jurisdiction, you get to choose more of your courses, then they could choose courses that they like. Or do you think that this needs to be sort of just a personal thing where they go, you know what, let's try this? Or maybe the parents are like, hey, try this thing out.
So that's a good question. The way I believe, public education systems should work, they should be obliged to operate as at least to offer it like as an option, so that if like I think education, especially in young ages, it should all come from like sort of personal motivation, that is like curiosity, natural curiosity that students have. And with all the great tools that you have today, like CodeMonkey for coding, but you have you have similar game-based learning products for practically any other subject in the world. So there's no reason why schools shouldn't offer the largest variety as possible of those self-paced learning experiences, so that kids can build up on their natural personal curiosity. So I definitely think it should be mandated for each school to offer this at least as an elective.
Well, especially these days too, right? Because there's so much tech out there now. And I mean, just thinking kind of how we were taught it, at least in school, and I use the same, kind of verbiage now, is like you kind of think logically like a computer, like it's a different way to think. And like exposing kids to say, like, hey, it's not, you don't just go to the computer and say, hey man, make me a slider on my website or something like that. You go in and you go, okay, like what do we got? We got an image, we have to have an if statement here. So if the user clicks this button, then this, and then there's obviously various methods to do that. And so kind of thinking in that way maybe would help like a kid, especially since they're like a sponge and they're absorbing everything. I'd imagine it would help them actually like think like, okay, like there's another way to think than just sort of like in the analog of real life, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a very, and for example, now with generative AI and all that, like it might be that in the future you won't necessarily need to be able to write a lot of code yourself to get a computer to do stuff for you. Like things get done more and more automatically, even before this, Gen AI stuff that we were seeing the last couple of years. But I still think, like you said, it's like it's a very good thing to do when you're young, to get a better understanding of how the world we live in work, because technology is now practically everywhere, and this is a good way to understand the way computers work. Just trying to write a small program, a small piece of code, trying to get the computer to do something. It's the best way to learn by doing, to learn how those machines fundamentally work.
And I 100% agree with that, because I know that I've had several conversations with people, especially in college, where they were concerned, oh, like computers are going to get so good, we're not going to need technicians. We're not going to need people to like fix them or set them up and all the rest of it. But my argument was always like, people are meaning the user is like, they seem like they're an expert, or they feel like they're an expert when they press sync on iCloud. But the instant that sync button doesn't work, they don't know what to do. They don't know that the Wi-Fi might be out. They don't know that the internet might be out. Like they have no idea those different parts. And so learning the parts kind of it really gives them, at the very least, some insights. Even if they need to call tech support, they can kind of talk at a higher level, and it's just going to help them just in general.
Exactly. And developing this type of approach of like, we call it debugging, coders, when we try to fix a broken piece of code or something that's not working the way we expect it to work, or, you run into those things every day, even if you're not in a tech job or dealing with software directly. I don't know, something stopped working in your stereo or your home theater or whatever, and you need to be able to understand where is the problem. Is it the Wi-Fi? Is it the whatever, the computer, the receiver, the speaker, like, those kind of things. So it just helps you develop this way of thinking.
And that actually leads like perfectly into my next point here, which are that, like a lot of the time, like you are trying to fix your, like you said, your stereo. Maybe it's someone who, their Spotify isn't working, and now they have a few steps, since they have some insights, they have a few steps to try on their phone, restart this, try that, try the Wi-Fi, try the cellular, whatever. And when people are going through that, they go to a tutorial or like a guide. And oftentimes coding tutorials or a tutorial on how to fix your stereo or fix your app are very straight to the point, so that a person can kind of like learn it, fix the app, fix their stereo, and move on. But I noticed that CodeMonkey has sort of gamified the learning process. And I would assume that's to do with kids. So how important is gamification when teaching kids to code? Are there any other special considerations? Like if gamification is one of them, are there any other things that you have to consider when trying to introduce a kid to this stuff?
So that's a great question. First distinction I would make is between gamification and game-based learning. So gamification is using elements from the game's world to increase engagement in any process, in a learning process, in a business process. It could be in a diet or exercise process. So gamification would be adding things like points, badges, achievement, leaderboards, just to leverage those engagement mechanisms in any other process that you want a person, yourself or someone else to engage in for a longer period of time. Where game-based learning is actually creating a game, a game experience, a real game, like with characters and a virtual world and plot and goals and challenges, levels that you progress through. And while you're playing that game, sort of without noticing, you're also learning stuff. And game-based learning has been around as long as computer games has been around. If you can recall, I don't know, the first they would actually teach a person how to fly an aircraft, while the person was, the far they were concerned they were just playing a game, but they were also learning this very complex, this very complex operation or set of skills that requires to take off and fly and navigate and land an aircraft. So that's the difference between game-based learning and gamification. And now with computer games and coding, I think game-based learning could be used for almost anything, but definitely for coding, it's a very natural and easy fit because, well, that's just the way the CodeMonkey is designed, but also other products similar to CodeMonkey, you're already in a computer environment when you're playing a computer game, and it's so easy to design the game in the way that instead of controlling your character in the game by using the keyboard or a joystick or anything like that, any other gaming device, you just control the character by giving it commands using computer code, programming language. And that's, that's a very natural transition. So I think game-based learning is a very powerful tool for learning and teaching almost everything. But for coding and computer science, it's really a very natural fit.
How much do you think needs to go into masking the learning? So I'll like explain that. So I remember when I was younger, I had a computer, and it was I guess it would be the later 90s. I had a computer in the house. It was the only computer in the house, of course. We didn't have phones and everything else in our pockets. And there were educational games that I would play, but the education was like super obvious. Like it would be like, oh, you need to enter this door. Here's a huge for the time mathematical formula, and enter in the answer kind of thing. And I would get turned off by that as a kid. I'd be like, man, like I'm just doing math, but like there's some people running around on the screen. How much goes into that masking? Like, do you think that masking the learning is important?
So that depends on the situation, I guess, the context, and again, going back to this key element of motivation. So let's say now you're in a school environment, and when I was, it was the 80s, I was going to my elementary school in my hometown, and classes most of the time it was quite boring, and then we would get to have an hour a week where we play those educational computer games where you said the masking is pretty obvious, but still it was better than a regular class, with just my old teacher and a blackboard, writing stuff that we need to memorize or copy down to our notebooks. But nowadays, when a lot of the learning is being done by children on their free time at home with their devices, like, smartphones or tablets or computers at home, and you're competing with, super engaging, super fun and exciting computer games that are not trying also to teach anything, then there's more effort that needs to be put into this, what you refer to as masking, because again, you're not competing with the old, with the old classic classroom experience with 30 kids and a teacher and a blackboard. You're competing with extremely addictive, I would say, even computer games. So yeah, you need to do a better job.
I totally remember those days too of like exactly what you said. You're in the class, you're just kind of doing your math worksheets, whatever. And then eventually it's like, hey, once a month, once a week, whatever, go into the computer lab and like, again, do the same math. But like, I think we had a circus game or something, and it was like, wow, this is like a lot better. This is a lot better than me just writing down like 2 + 2 is 4, 4 + 6 is 10, things like that. Like, it's just like, okay, like I'll do the same thing, but I'll do it at the circus. Like that's
Yeah,
better.
exactly.
I want to just like touch on something because I think with all this stuff, with learning to code these days, things like that, there's a bit of an elephant in the room, and it's to do with AI. Now, we've heard about AI too much probably in the media. It's like kind of a rolling of the eyes. I'm sure some audience members are doing right now. But I do think that it's so big that it is something that still needs to be addressed. And it needs to be addressed because it's really shaping how a lot of professional software developers are approaching their work. And this is where kind of the concern comes in. So some people believe that coders are going to be replaced by AI in the near future and, maybe 5 years, 10 years, things like that. And so they may have a concern that their children are learning a skill, if they're learning coding specifically, that will quickly become obsolete after they get into the industry.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that? Like if a parent, which would be a prospective customer, was interested in having their kid use CodeMonkey, but they had some AI and, longevity of the skill concerns, what would you tell them? Should they be concerned about this?
So that's a great question. Obviously, we get asked that a lot recently. There are several different aspects to that. So first, and this ties back to the first part of our conversation is you have to ask yourself, why are you letting your child experiment with coding, and is the main reason for the child to acquire a job skill? And the answer is probably no. When we're talking about young kids, the reason that you want your children to engage in these coding activities is so that they develop more general, very useful 21st century skills like problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, all those things that we mentioned in the first part of this conversation. And even if coding is going to be, or programming computers is going to be done in a completely different way in 10 years from now, those skills will still be priceless. And coding, like we're doing it nowadays with kids, is just a very effective way of developing those skills. So I wouldn't be worried about that. The same way I wouldn't be worried about, why are we still teaching kids to add numbers or subtract or multiply or divide? There's not a single job in the world that still requires people to do math like manually, right? But we still have our kids spend so much time in doing those things because, again, it develops those very essential general skills that you need to develop and enable to in the process of learning to do math. So that's the first aspect of it. The second one I would say is like it's so hard to predict the way technology will look 10 years from now because, like you said, it's developing more and more quickly. But I think it's safe to say that developers are not going to be replaced by AI anytime soon, but developers that know how to use AI to become more effective in their work, they will probably replace the coders that don't. And, the same way that happened to accountants, I'd say, with spreadsheets, right? Like we still have a lot of people making a good living being accountants, even though we have spreadsheets doing all the technical side of bookkeeping or, bookkeeping apps. So I do think that it is important to adapt what we teach, to adapt it to the new technological reality that it is now becoming the work environment for coders. And what we're doing at CodeMonkey for that, obviously the new courses that we develop, the courses for high schools, for example, they already come built in with those AI tools as part of the learning environment. So we still, prepare kids for the AP computer science principal exams that if it's high school student in the United States, but part of the learning environment, the coding environment that we create for them, it also embeds an AI assistant or like copilot that helps the student code the same way that coders nowadays use those AI tools in their work environment.
I'm honestly really glad to hear that, like, the kids are being exposed to the AI aspect of coding because it's totally revolutionized, a lot of people's procedures. It's really like raised a lot of software developers' output. And I remember that again, like back in my primary school days, everyone was like almost afraid of the internet, and it was like, no, you can't look up internet information. You can't look up information for your book report on the internet. It has to be, go to the library, dig through these pages, dig through these books. And it was like, well, in the future, I don't think we're going to be doing that. And like, I don't even have any paper on my desk. Like it's like the times have definitely changed, and it's good to see that like sort of what will likely be, because as you said, it's really hard to estimate the future of technology, but it looks like AI is going to be with us for a long time, if not forever. And it's good to get that sort of exposure at a younger age where it's like, hey, I can get help from the computer and I can learn with it and learn how to use the tool itself. Right now, AI is still so much of a tool and less a replacement thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Now, I do have one question, just because you may have some insights here, and this is going to sound unrelated, but it is related. Now, we saw, at least in North America, we saw the trucker industry take a huge hit in the new recruits department due to self-driving vehicles. Now, do you see a common way of thinking now? So what I mean by that is, like, obviously self-driving vehicles, it was like trucker, all these trucks are just going to drive themselves, are going to drive themselves. And so no one's signing up to become a trucker, even though it's a huge industry here. And then it's like, well, these trucks aren't quite ready, but we also saw our new recruit level drop. Are you seeing any sort of enrollment like decline or like interest of people being like, that coding stuff is like, yesteryear? And do you see anybody like already having written it off? And I would think it's premature to write it off at this point.
Good question. We don't see it at CodeMonkey. We're still growing every year very steadily. This all the talk about AI does add this confusion or those additional questions and doubts. But it's funny. I think those questions and doubts are coming from schools or school districts that still haven't adopted computer science as part of the curriculum, and now it just like sort of gives them another reason why not to adapt. You know what I mean? While the one that are already into it, they understand that this actually, if anything, it increases the need for technological education. It increases the need for understanding, nurturing already in young ages the understanding of the technological world around us. So I wouldn't say I see a decline. I see this adding some more confusion and doubts and question, but I don't see a decline. On the contrary, I think we're growing faster than we've grown before in terms of adding new clients, new customers. So yeah, this is not something where we're affected by yet.
I honestly really appreciate that. Like, I like that people are now kind of like, it's almost like there's a new frontier in tech. Tech is exciting again, I guess you could say, even though it's kind of always been exciting, it always kind of advances, but it's cool to see, this new frontier kind of arise. And like, as you said, you're starting to get people raise those questions, and then it's like, well, what is this coding thing kind of, right? Like, it might raise that question in some people's minds or in more people's minds than normal, just because it's kind of like in the zeitgeist now of like, hey, download Copilot on your phone. By the way, it can code for you. It's like, what does that mean? And then that person might be like, well, I'll go learn on, from a guide, from CodeMonkey, from this, that, and the other thing. And that person, never, even thought of doing that before, or never even like wanted to know what coding really was.
Yeah, it's funny. It does have that sort of reverse effect, but it's a good thing. And if you think about it, with education, with education system, CodeMonkey, main business is catering to school system, public school systems, school districts, governments in other countries outside the US where you have a more centralized education system. And those systems, they adapt slowly. I used to think that's a problem, but now, 10 years into this business, I think that that's actually a good thing, that education system, they adapt slowly, because the world sometimes, adapted changes very quickly, especially, technological innovation, but not everything that is new always sort of lasts. And the way that we're using AI now, it's so new, developing so quickly. I think nobody really knows when we talk about AI education, teaching kids about AI, everybody's talking about it, but nobody really knows what are exactly the essential things that we need to teach about it. We don't know because it's so new and it's still so fresh and evolving so rapidly. We're about, classic coding that's been around now for, I would say, 100 years, almost, 70, 80 years. We already know what are the principles that are here to stay, sequencing, functions, loops, or data structure, things like that, the fundamentals. Now we know what the fundamentals are. We really understand it. We know which concepts are here to stay. And those are the concepts that are worthwhile teaching at young ages.
Absolutely. I totally agree. What's really interesting about this industry is that it just keeps, kind of like changing and evolving and like learning, kind of new things is always kind of on the forefront of everyone's mind. And like you said, like no one's a master of AI yet because AI hasn't been around. Classic coding's been around for, nearing a century or something like that ballpark. And it's like, you see these websites and these people that are like, I'm a master prompt engineer. It's like, no, you're not. Like no one, like this tool came out like a year and a half ago. No, you're not. Like no one knows what this thing is. And, the next update might completely change the whole form factor. It's like when smartphones were first coming out, it's like, are we going to have keyboards on phones or not? Are we going to have front facing cameras or not? We still haven't figured it out. So you're like, that wasn't the master amazing smartphone. Not yet.
Exactly. And no one becomes a master of anything in 2 years. Remember back in around the year 2000, there was this .com bubble and everybody wanted to learn to code. That was the first time. And there was a lot of courses back then online. Become a master coder in 2 weeks. And I remember reading some articles against this, saying you don't become a master of anything in 2 weeks or in 2 months or not even in 2 years. So, like to become a master coder, you need to do this as your main thing, I'd say at least for a decade. And the same would go for AI engineers. And like you said, though things hasn't been around long enough. I mean, AI as a concept has been also around for almost a century. I'm talking about the new generative AI and NLP. It's still so quite new. And yeah, it's just too early to even try to claim that how to create experts in that.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, I remember when machine learning was the thing and it was like, this is the future. And then, I mean, sure, it's still used. Like, of course, machine learning is still important, but I certainly don't hear about it in the zeitgeist anymore. Like it's already been kind of like tossed aside to the techs in the background. Like, yeah, use it when you need, but we're onto this new thing. We're onto these, LLMs and all these other tools now. We've moved on. And it's like, well, if you were a master of machine, learning and you thought it was going to become this huge thing that was always in the zeitgeist, unfortunately, that's just not the case in that particular case.
Yeah. By the way, I think that's the reason the first AI course, the course about AI that CodeMonkey created, and it was created, I think less than 2 years ago. It didn't deal with generative AI or NLP at all. It was just about classic image recognition, building a model and training it like a basic machine learning model that can later, distinguish between two different sets of images. And I think this kind of technology is being thoroughly used everywhere for a long enough time so that we know that, definitely it's worthwhile teaching that to children, like what is machine learning, what is image recognition, what is classification of pictures, and this really affects already lives of people everywhere, this is really making decisions around us all the time, those models. And it's quite obvious by now that you need to understand it and exactly what is it about it is worthwhile understanding.
Absolutely. And I think that actually transitions like perfectly into, because we've talked about, like you guys made that machine learning course and the importance of that. And we talked about some other things like that CodeMonkey is doing, the gamification and such. What are the future plans for CodeMonkey? Are there any specific updates coming soon? Is there anything that existing or even prospective upcoming customers should be looking forward to? Is there any big plans coming?
So like I mentioned, we've expanded obviously into AI, but we're also expanded into digital literacy, which is interesting. So digital literacy has been a part of the curriculum in the United States, in most states in the United States for around 20 years now, but it's getting revisited now due to all the talk about AI. So now there's an increased concern about the new potential risks around digital use and digital citizenship. So if digital literacy 20 years ago was about how to use a search engine or how to send an email or how to use a spreadsheet, digital literacy now is about, how to have a healthy usage of social media or AI, to be aware of risks and understanding how those new technologies basically work, because it's all becoming so much more complicated. So we're branching out into those spaces of I would call it like the new digital literacy. AI, which I mentioned, high schools. So CodeMonkey, like you said, was initially designed to allow children of younger ages to experiment with coding, but we gradually grown with our learners from lower elementary school to upper elementary school, middle school, and now we're expanding into high schools. So we've already launched our AP Computer Science Principal course, and now we're adding a whole package of computer science courses for high school. So that's coming up this summer. Yeah, I think those are the main things that we're now busy with.
And I mean, just the one thing that really stood out to me in there is like it is really a new age with stuff we already have, like the social media stuff, like you said. And like I know there's a lot of concerns, like even lawmakers are doing things and whatever with kids and social media and things like that. And so like kids or teens, tweens, whatever, heck, even young adults, it is a new landscape. Like I know people think social media has been around for a while, and it has, but it's evolved, and now it's like really a part of our lives. It's no longer just like I took a picture of my meal and I sent it on, like I put it on there, and then my aunt liked it. It's now like 2 million people liked it, and people are upset that you used the wrong hot sauce. And it's like, how do I navigate this? And so it's good to hear, that kind of language or that kind of learning is going to be in there as well. And it's great to see, that you're into high schools as well, getting, continuing kind of the learning from the younger age group into the older age group as well.
Yeah, and it's it's exciting to still be doing this for a decade, a bit over than a decade now. Yeah, and I'm glad that we have all those new challenges evolving around us, because it keeps us on our toes, and it keeps the job interesting. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to continue doing this for at least another decade.
That's great to hear. And I think that this would be the perfect time, actually, because Jonathan, I'd love to, kind of have you take the floor and kind of share any links. Is there anything, maybe certain links, obviously the CodeMonkey website, but any specific page or social media or anything that you'd like the people to be able to, either see or reach out to you or a sales staff or anything like that with questions or concerns or even personal things, if you have a personal hobby website? And please, the floor is yours. Share away.
So CodeMonkey.com, obviously the best place to start. You can sign up for a home trial if you're a parent or a child older than 13. And you can sign up for a school trial if you're a teacher or an administrator in a school or school district. So, and there's a CodeMonkey blog there where you can read everything about education and technology, gamification, game-based learning, project-based learning. So I also recommend the CodeMonkey blog. We recently published a digital book about gamification in learning that you can get a free copy of by signing up to our newsletter on CodeMonkey.com. I recommend that as well. It's not long, and I think it's a fascinating read if you're into education and game-based learning. What else? I'm happy to connect personally with anyone that want to talk about anything. I think the best way to reach me is on LinkedIn, Jonathan Schor. That's Schor, my last name. And I think that's about it.
That's excellent. I got all that written down as you were talking there, and I will have those links for the listener. I will have those links in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com when this episode goes live. So you could just go there and find all the stuff. Jonathan, it's been great. Thank you for all these insights in this fantastic interview. I hope you had as much fun as I did. And thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, sure. Well, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Looking forward for the episode going live.
Excellent. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that interview as much as we did, but now it is time to end. Before we do so, I'd like to thank our $3 tier patrons: Tim from The Web Hacker on thewebhacker.com, Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com, Garrett Segal, Level Up Financial Planning via www.levelupfinancialplanning.com, Magnus from YesWeb via yesweb.se, Syntaxify from the HTML All the Things Discord server, and Stacy Mosteler from the website swoonworthydesigns.com. And we'd also like to give a shout out to Michael LaRocca, a contributing author on HTMLallthethings.com. Michael is the author of Self-Taught, the X Generation blog at selftaughttxg.com. Feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform that you are listening to this on, and this outro will sign us off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.